Good evening, everyone. My name is Sophia, Yvonne, and I am here today with my groupmates to share with you our assigned topics. In the world of database management, MySQL is one of the most popular relational database management systems used by businesses and organizations of all sizes. In this report, we will explore some of the essential concepts related to MySQL database design, focusing on unique, not null, primary key, foreign key, check, and default. Each of these concepts plays a critical role in defining the structure and integrity of MySQL database. By understanding these concepts and how they work together, you can create a well-structured and reliable MySQL databases that can efficiently handle complex data management tasks. So let's dive in and explore each of these concepts in more detail. The first one is MySQL unique. The unique constraint in a relational database management system ensures that all values in a particular column or set of columns are different, which means that no two rows in that column or set of columns can have the same value. So here is the unique constraint on create table. The following SQL creates a unique constraint on the ID column when the person's table is created. So again, this code creates a table named person with four columns: ID, last name, first name, and age. The ID and last name columns are both set to not null, meaning a value must be entered for each row of data. And the ID column also has a unique constraint, ensuring each value in the column is unique. And the first name and age columns are not set to not null, so they can be left blank. Overall, this code creates a table with the data integrity constraints to prevent the duplicate missing of data. And we have here another example to name a unique constraint and to define a unique constraint on multiple columns. So you can use the following SQL syntax. Again, the code creates a table named person with four columns: ID, last name, first name, and the age. And the highlighted part creates a constraint named UC persons and applies the unique constraint to the combination of the ID and the last name. So the unique constraint ensures that no two rows in the table have the same combination of values in both of these columns. So we have here another example in creating unique constraint on the outer table. So to create a unique constraint on the ID column when the table is already created, you can use this following SQL syntax. So the code uses the outer table statement to modify an existing table named persons by adding a unique constraint to the ID column. The unique constraint ensures that each value in the ID column is unique and prevents duplicate data from being entered into this column. In the add unique statement, it adds the constraint to the column, and the outer table statement is used to modify the structure of the existing table. So overall, this SQL code modifies the table structure by adding a constraint to an existing column. We have another example also to name a unique constraint and to define a unique constraint on multiple columns. So you can use the following SQL syntax. And the code uses the outer table statement to add a constraint named UC person to an existing table person. So the constraint is a unique constraint that applies to the combination of the ID and last name columns. And this unique constraint ensures that each combination of values in the ID and last name columns is unique and preventing duplicate data from being entered into these columns. Overall, this SQL code modifies the table structure by adding a new constraint to an existing table.
MySQL not null. a constraint that ensures a column does not contain null values. This requires a field to always contain a value, which means that you cannot insert a new record or update a record without adding a value to this field. In other words, empty values are not accepted. Not null on create table. The following SQL ensures that ID, last name, and first name columns will not accept null values when the persons table is created. Create table persons. ID int not null, last name varchar not null, first name varchar not null, age int. So in this example, the user must insert values in the columns ID, last name, and first name. Not null on alter table. For those who don't know yet, the alter table statement is used to add, delete, or modify columns in an existing table. To create a not null constraint on the age column, when the person's table is already created, use the following SQL. Alter table persons, modify age int not null. So with this, the user must ensure that all the columns in the table persons never have the null value assigned.
MySQL primary key. The primary key constraint uniquely identifies each record in a table. Primary keys must contain unique values and cannot contain null values. The primary key must be unique value because it is the one that represents the table, and it is the one that uniquely identifies the row of the table in a column. Here an example of primary key on create table. The following SQL creates a primary key on the ID column when the persons table is created. Create table persons, ID not null, last name varchar, first name varchar, age int, primary key ID. What this makes is that it assigns ID into primary key when you creating a table. Can we put multiple primary keys? Yes, we can assign multiple primary keys on a table. Here is an example of multiple primary key on a table. To allow naming a primary key constraint and defining primary key constraint on multiple columns, use the following SQL syntax. Create table persons, ID not null, last name varchar, first name varchar, age int, constraint pkey underscore person, primary key, ID, last name. What this does is that it creates a name on a constraint pkey person and assigns ID and last name in a primary key when creating the table. But what if the table is already created? Now, we can go to the primary key on alter table. To create a primary key on constraint on the ID column, when the table is already created, use the following SQL. Alter table persons, add primary key ID. It means that the table persons is being altered and it assigns a primary key on the ID column. And that's all for the primary key. MySQL Foreign Key. The foreign key constraint is used to prevent actions that would destroy links between tables. A foreign key is a field or collection of fields in one table that refers the primary key in another table. It means that it links primary key to be called in another table. The table with the foreign key is called the child table, and the table with the primary key is the reference or parent table. Look at the following two tables. As you can see in the below table, the person table is the parent table, and the order table is the child table. The child table calls the person ID column from the person's table. So how do we create a foreign key while creating the table? To assign a foreign key on a create table, the following SQL creates foreign key on the person's ID column when the orders table is created. Create table orders, order ID int not null, order number int, person ID int, primary key order, foreign key person ID, references persons, person ID. This code creates a table named orders. As you can see, we assigned order ID as the primary key, and we get person ID references on person's table person ID column. So here's another example of foreign key on create table. To allow naming of foreign key constraint and for defining foreign key constraint on multiple columns, use the following SQL syntax. Create table orders, order ID int not null, order number int, person ID, primary key, order ID, constraint if key underscore person ID, person order, foreign key, person ID, references, persons, person ID. This example code creates a constraint named if key underscore person order and assigns person ID as the foreign key and get references on persons table on the person ID column. So what if we already created a table? Can we still assign a foreign key? Yes, we can. Here is an example of foreign key on alter table. To create a foreign key constraint on person ID column when the orders table is already created, use the following SQL. Alter table orders add foreign key person ID references persons person ID. So when the table is already created, this code alters that order table and add a foreign key named person ID column. We get references from persons table on the person ID column. How do we adding constraint on foreign key on alter table? To allow naming of foreign key constraint and for defining foreign key constraint on multiple columns, use the following SQL syntax. Alter table orders add constraint if key underscore person order, foreign key, person ID, references, persons, person ID. So what this does, it alters the table orders to add a constraint named if key underscore person order and assigns a foreign key named person ID references into persons table on the person ID column. And that's all for the foreign key.
So good day everyone, I'm Retchel Langeras. So I'm going to tackle or to discuss the MySQL check. The check constraint is used to limit the value range that can be placed in a column. If you define a check constraint on a column, it will allow only certain values for this column. So check on create table. The following SQL creates a check constraint on an age column when the person's table is created. The check constraint ensures that the age of a person must be 18 or older. So for this syntax, so example ni siya guys ha, create table person and then ID int not null. So kaning not null kay ga-represent ni siya kanang dili siya mo accept og value nga blank or kanang wala bitaw siya value. Mo na siyang not null. Then last name varchar 255. Then kaning varchar 255 is mo ni siyang kanang ga-indicate nga dili siya mo accept o kanang values na kanang ga-exceed og 255 text. So kailangan 255 text ra ginayan dawaton, mo na ginayang limit. Then not null. So first name varchar 255. Age int, then check age greater than or equal to 18. So next one is defining a check constraint on multiple columns. So for this example, we have check table persons, ID int not null, last name varchar 255 not null, first name varchar 255, age int, city varchar 255. Constraint. So constraint use no kanang para ginalimit niya ang kanang data type in the table. So check person, check age greater than or equal to 18 and city sadness. So next one is check on table. So to create a check constraint on the age column, when the table is already created, use the following SQL. So outer table, persons, then add check age greater than or equal to 18. So the last one is to define a check constraint on multiple columns. So for this example, we use outer table. So what is outer table? Mo na siyang ginagamit if ever gusto ka mag-add, delete, or modify no kanang ga-exist na nga column table. Then persons, add constraint, check person age, check age greater or equal to 18, and city equals sadness.
MySQL default. So the SQL default constraints is used to set a default value for a column. So ang default value is gaalaw siya sa user to fill a column with a default or fixed value. Kung wala kay value na specified sa column at the time of insertion, then the default value will be added automatically to that column. For example, kaning default on create tables. Create tables person dana kaning ID int not null last name varchar not null first name varchar age int and kaning city varchar. So nag-add man ta og default value dana sa city varchar, so na-add sa dito kay wala man siya gi-specified nga value nagibutang dito sa city varchar. So na-add siya dito, nabilong siya sa city, ubos din siya sa varchar. So para sa ning sunod na example, the default constraints can be also used to insert system value by using functions like current dates. And create table orders. So nanatay orders ni taas. Pati po ding ID int not null, order number int not null. So dito nato nabutang ang atong default, naka-add siya og current date. Ang pulo sa running default is pang-add lang siya if wala lang na specified nga value. So last example para sa ning kwan. Table nga persons. Nag-add lang ta og sadness dito sa alter city. So ang pulo sa default is used to set a default value sa column. Tapos na-add na din to siya din kung magamit ka itong default. Kung wala lang siya kanang mga other value na specified. So murag itong ang default SQL.